Hey everyone, welcome back to here in Apologetics. Super pumped you're joining us today. Today is part 3 of my cumulative case for Christian theism. Today we're going to be looking at the phenomena of design. So, just to get things started, in part 1 we talked about the importance of truth and why we should pursue truth, along with showing that truth is like knowable and something we can find. In part 2 I argued that there is some sort of necessary foundation that's responsible for our universe. And in part 3 I'm going to begin to build my case that it's God, starting with the nature of design. Full playlist is down below in the description if you want to check that out. Part 1 and 2 might be super helpful before diving into part 3, but before too long, here we go. So, I'm starting off with Genesis 1:4, where it says, "And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness." This verse, when I read it, just to me shows that God's creating some sort of like order and structure to the universe. And this is going to be the basis of a design argument. Obviously, perhaps the most famous design argument comes from William Paley with the divine watchmaker analogy. And a little quote from him says that the inference we think is inevitable. He's referring to the inference of design, that the watch must have had a maker, that there must have existed at some point and at some place or other an artificer or artificers who formed it for the purpose which we find it actually to answer, who comprehended its construction and designed its use. So Paley says that we can infer that a watch must be designed due to its organized complexity. And similarly, we can look at the organized complexity of the world, which also is going to point to a designer of the world. And this is the basis of the design argument. So we're looking at levels of complexity in detail of the universe that suggest that there is some sort of design. We aren't here by chance or anything along these lines, but there actually is some sort of like good reason to think that there would have to be some sort of designer. So my argument today is pretty simple. Two premises. Premise 1 is that the design of the universe is more likely on theism than atheism. So design is evidence for theism. So this isn't some sort of proof for like you look at like Craig's design argument or like hey, like fine tuning's real. There's no atheistic explanation, so there must be a God. Rather, I just want to say that the design of the universe is going to be some evidence for theism. Because it's more likely on theism that there would be this design than on atheism. So why use this approach? I believe that there are no clear proofs that establish theism or atheism. So in the absence of these proofs, we need a different way of looking for the best explanations of things. In my arguments that I'm going to use for most of the rest of this book, I'm going to look at certain phenomena and argue that if these facts are more likely to be true if God exists and if God does not exist, then we have good reason to believe that God exists. If there's 5 good reasons to believe God exists and 2 good reasons to believe that God does not exist, it seems like that there's going to be a really good reason to think that God, in fact, does exist. So the project of the rest of this book / presentation is just to build a cumulative case for the existence of God and extend this case to Christianity. So all I'm trying to do is like add a bunch of evidential chips to the theistic side from here, looking at different phenomena and saying, hey, these are a lot more expected on like theism, the idea that there is some sort of God versus atheism. So that's my argument. So first we have to ask, is the universe designed? So there's a couple ways we're going to look at this. And the first way is looking at scientific evidence suggesting design. So obviously the fine-tuning argument is very popular and we can get into like all the crazy amounts of like constants and things like that. But I just want to give you a general survey of what's going on here when we talk about fine-tuning. So the cosmological constant describes the expansion of the universe's acceleration. Robin Collins writes regarding the cosmological constant, quote, without fine-tuning or some new principle of physics, the cosmological constant is expected to be at least 10 to the 53 to 10 to the 120th times larger than the maximum life permitting value, end quote. That's a pretty big number, 10 to the 120th. Even if you go to that little number, 10 to the 53, we're looking at a really, really, really big number. So explaining the reason for the value of the cosmological constant is known as one of the biggest challenges facing modern cosmology. If the cosmological constant was much larger, as it's expected to be, the universe would expand too fast and not permit any galaxies to form. If there are no galaxies, there are no stars, and without stars, there would be no planets, most likely. And without planets, the possibility for the development of life looks grim. So when we're looking at the cosmological constant, we're saying, hey, there's this constant that kind of governs the expansion of the universe. And if it was different than the way it is, and we're looking at it and it's very unexpected that it is the way it is, we don't got galaxies. And without galaxies, we don't got stars. And without stars, we don't got planets. And we don't have planets, those other forms of life or life in general, it's not looking too hot. So you have this question of like, why is the cosmological constant the way it is? That's one example of design. Another example that Collins talks about is different laws of nature which must exist to allow complex life to exist. These factors include things such as gravity and the strong nuclear force, which bind molecules together. Without gravity, there would be nothing to hold together stars, planets, or us. And without the strong nuclear force, no complex molecules would be able to develop, which in turn would prevent intelligent life from developing. Molecules seem necessary for life, as you and all other living organisms are made up of them. Without molecules, the building blocks leading to you and me would not exist. So, again, when we're looking at design, we're trying to wonder we're looking at these things that are governing the universe and like the building blocks that are leading to life. If these things seem to be fine tuned, like it's unlikely they'd come to existence. But then we have this question of like, ooh, this is kind of suspicious. So, yeah. Also, in addition to the scientific phenomena, where you can look at different constants and argue that there's fine tuning, there's also philosophical evidence to suggest that the universe is designed. So let's just think for a second that God doesn't exist, and the foundation of reality is something indifferent, such as quantum particles, energy, matter, or something else along these lines. All things being equal, there's no reason to think that the universe would be hospitable to life. If the foundation is indifferent, there's no reason to think that the universe would allow for intelligent life to exist, even assuming the possibility of an evolutionary process. But why on earth would this be the case? One way to think about this is through the idea of possible universes. From the armchair, we can imagine many different ways that things could have played out. What if the South won the Civil War? What if Tom Brady was drafted by the Steelers? What if Adolf Hitler never existed? In all these scenarios, the world could have played out differently than the one we are living in. We can imagine how things could have played out differently from the power of our own reason. For me, just sitting in my chair, we can think about all the different possible ways the world could have came about. Similarly, we can reflect on the possible ways the universe could have played out. Many possible universes would just end in chaos, with no life existing at all. We can easily conceive of a world where only two atoms exist, or the space is an empty void with no life within it. When I reflect on the different ways the world could have been, it seems as if there's only a small fraction of the worlds that would allow for intelligent life to exist, whereas worlds without intelligent life would be much more common. This means that our universe at least appears to be designed because it's unlikely that there would be a universe that supports the existence of life. So what I'm trying to get at is just think about these two ideas. One is theism, and God exists. And the other one is atheism, where God does not exist. And I'm focusing on atheism here. And I'm trying to say that it's very unlikely that we'd see a universe like ours given atheism. Because just think about all the different ways the universe could have come about. Maybe there's one atom, or two atoms, or three atoms, or 4, or 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 100. Maybe there's just like a microphone floating around in space. It seems like given atheism, you have to epistemically allow for all these things to be at least conceivably possible. Obviously, people wouldn't say it's metaphysically possible necessarily. And because of that, when you just think of all the different ways things could have gone, there's a bunch more than what there's no life, than that there's complex life, such as you and me. So I think that's going to be a powerful chip in favor of design, because we're going to say, hey, given atheism, a world where there is this complex life with moral values such as you and me seems very, very unlikely, because there's so many different ways that things could have, at least by the light of the armchair, could have gone. So why is this design more likely on theism than atheism? So let's say there's scientific and philosophical reason to think that there is in fact design that allows for like embodied agents such as you and me. Now we have to ask, like, why is this design more likely on theism than atheism? Put simply, given atheism, there's no reason for the foundation to produce a universe with life over a universe without life. Nothing given the hypothesis of atheism predicts that there'd be a universe with human beings or a universe with just a couple of atoms floating around. So given atheism, at least epistemically, I think we'd have to say that like all possible universes would have a probability, and maybe even probability, because there's just no reason for the foundation for one universe over another, given like a mere atheism. So if this is the case, a universe without life is more likely to exist given atheism, where the foundation is indifferent. Do there be many more possible ways where there is no life than there is a universe with life? However, if there is a God, there's reason for God to prefer a universe with life over a universe without life. If there's a perfect God like the Christians, the Muslims, and the Jews hold to, it makes sense that God would create beings who are able to reflect him in abilities such as power, rationality, and value. This is because these beings would be good to create. Human beings have more valuable than a rock or an atom or something else along those lines. I argue that a perfect being would create, if anything, good things. It is likely that God would create a universe because creating moral agents like us is a good thing to do. Since life is good, a universe hospitable to life would be more likely than a universe inhospitable to life, given theism. So why is design more likely on theism than atheism? I'm going to argue that we could just say like maybe like undesigned or whatever, I didn't plan this out, would be a more likely outcome on atheism, because there's just a bunch of epistemically possible ways that like there's no life than that there is life given atheism. So I'm going to say that, like, given atheism, we'd at least expect epistemically there to be no life. Whereas given theism, we'd expect there to be something like design that allows for life, because God would want to create beings such as us or something along these lines, since there's moral value in them. So since that design is more likely on theism than atheism, the design that does exist is going to be evidence for theism, because this just lines up more with what we'd expect in a theistic world. So that's why I think design is more likely on theism than on atheism. So a bunch of objections that I want to run through. So why would God want to design a universe that allows for life? This is kind of like divine psychology. Like, why on earth would God be interested in designing a universe that allows for agents such as us? Well, I think that if God chooses to create, he'll make beings of moral value. So if human beings have moral value, I think God would have reason to create them. Human beings are valuable in many ways. We can reason, worship, make moral decisions, and communicate with each other. All these things are good. I believe that a perfect being would find it desirable to create such beings. Since human existence is good, God would have reason to create us. Hence, God would want to design a universe that allows for us to exist. So, since our existence is good because we can make like moral decisions and whatnot, God would have reason to create us in a universe that allows for us to exist. So, perhaps maybe that's why God wants to design a universe that allows for life. Another objection is just like, how can we know the universe could have been different? This is kind of like Matt Dillon, honey, in our debate. He's a little bit of what it was he's like, how do we know the universe could have been different? Because there's only one universe that we know of, and it's this one, where there is life. And it seems to me like that the atheist, if you want to go this route, you're just gonna have to appeal to multiple brute facts at the foundation. And by brute facts, I mean things that just exist without any explanation for their existence. We can conceive that there are possible universes where no galaxies form and molecules can't form to combine complex life. But the atheist is going to have to do something else here. They're going to have to say that there is some sort of foundation, like the theist, and they're going to have to add something, and that the foundation was quantitatively configured in a way that would allow for intelligent life to evolve. This means that if the universe couldn't have been different, it is necessary, without further explanation, that there is a universe and that it had certain quantitative parameters that explain the apparent design of the universe. So all I'm saying is here is that we're just going to have to stack brute facts on atheism. Because on atheism, you're going to say that, well, there is some sort of foundation, and it just had to be this way designed quantitatively that explains the apparent design of the universe. And that's two brute facts, which is going to hurt the simplicity of your hypothesis. Furthermore, there's also the principle of indifference, which states in the absence of relevant evidence, we should give credence equally to all possible outcomes. So we should also consider it possible for the universe could have been different in the absence of some good reason to think that it could have not been different. Simply claiming that it's necessary goes against the principle of indifference, since there's no good reason to think that the universe couldn't have been different than the way it is. So in addition to saying like you're just going to add brute facts, I'm going to say like, hey, given the principle of indifference, unless you have a really good reason to think the universe couldn't have been any other way, we should at least think that it's possible the universe could have been different than the way it is. Also, another objection, isn't the universe just lifeless? First, when we're looking at this idea that the universe is 99.99% inhospitable life, the universe is also 100% life permitting. Our existence shows that the universe supports the existence of life. Furthermore, the design argument focuses on the idea that it's profound that any life exists at all, let alone life with deep moral value, such as us. Yes, the universe is mostly lifeless, but it's also completely organized. So I'll say that, yeah, like while most of the universe is inhospitable life, our universe permits life, like we exist. Also, I think this objection is just going to kick the fine-tuning argument up another level. If the rest of our universe is lifeless, why is our planet the one where life exists? If there's 10 gazillions of planets, that's not actual science. You can look it up, but it's a lot, as modern science suggests. And all the other ones, except ours, are lifeless. What makes our planet so special? It seems like there'd have to be some sort of explanation for like why we are the special ones. If everything else is lifeless and we got life, why are we so special? Why are we not like all the other planets? It seems like there's got to be some sort of further explanation here, and it's going to make fine-tuning. You can even make that like a stronger fine-tuning argument. Now, could life fit into any universe? This could be put in like the puddle analogy, and like put simply, a puddle could fit into any hole, but life cannot form in any universe. For example, the fine-tuning of the strong nuclear force allows for protons and neutrons to bind together in an atom. If they cannot bind, atoms would not certainly exist at all. Without the formation of atoms, there could be no form of complex life at all. Life just can't exist in any universe. If we don't have protons and neutrons, good luck trying to explain how like embodied conscious agents can come to exist. There's also an important difference between something being possible and it being probable. Suppose, for example, that silicon-based life could exist if the constants governing the universe were different. Given this possible world where silicon-based life exists, there are also many similar possible worlds where no life exists. There's a possible world where there are only 5 silicon atoms that exist. In a second possible world, the universe is too unstable for any life to come about. In a third, silicon life arises only for the universe to be immediately collapse and crush this new life's existence. It seems like to me that for every possible way that things go right and a different kind of life could emerge, assuming they're possible, there's also just a lot more ways that things could go wrong and no life comes about. So that's a big problem for the idea that life could just fit into any universe. Okay, now perhaps there's a multiverse. First, I just want to say that there's no empirical evidence suggesting that there's a multiverse. Second, even if there is a multiverse, this would just kick the problem of fine-tuning up another level. Why is there some sort of event or multiverse generator that's responsible for fine-tuning? It seems that this might need a further explanation. Fine-tuning may be explained away, but a more serious question would come forward, which is like, why is there this multiverse? Like, what explains this? Is this whole multiverse necessary? Like, how complex is our hypothesis getting for what's at the foundation of reality? In addition, if the multiverse is restricted, meaning it produced a finite number of universes, why didn't the multiverse generator produce either more or fewer universes? It seemed fine-tuning to allow for a specific number of universes to be created. If the multiverse is unrestricted, meaning every possible world exists, every possible world exists. This means nothing would be unlikely, from alien invasions to winning the lottery to having tea instead of coffee in the morning. If every possible world exists, it seems like to me like everything, like literally like everything goes. This is kind of a crazy thing if you think about every kind of possible world exists. Like, I don't know. I just think about that idea where every possible world exists. Everything could have been different. And that world not just couldn't have been different, but like actually does exist. That seems like a very complex hypothesis. That's how I think things, at least. But if your multiverse produces only a finite number of universes, you have to explain like why this amount of universes then like given another amount. Like, why is there 142 universes rather than like 143 or 141? We need some sort of further explanation that explains this. So I think the complexity of the multiverse is really going to count against it. Okay, so to wrap things up, in part 3, I've defended the design argument as a good reason to think that there is a necessary foundation that explains the universe and that it's a mind that I'm calling God. There are good scientific and intuitive reasons to think that the universe is designed. Given the wide array of possible universes that could have existed, it seems probable that if the foundation is indifferent to the existence of moral agents, it is unlikely that the universe would be the way it is. Rather, the universe would be lifeless. However, if the foundation of reality is God, we'd expect to find a universe that is designed and allows for moral agents to exist, such as us, which is in fact the universe that we exist in. So, long story short, design, like we see through scientific fine-tuning and through philosophical speculation, is more likely on theism than atheism. We'd expect a world with order that allows for beings such as you and me. We'd expect it to be more likely that they'd exist on theism than on atheism. So, since the design exists, we have evidence for theism over atheism. So here's some references, and thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you stay tuned for part 4. That's it. This is Zach. This is here in Apologetics, and we'll catch you next time. Goodbye.